Are you somebody who has a React interview coming up? Do you know if you're gonna be asked lead code questions or React coding questions? Are you finding it hard to find out what React coding questions are? Well, then this video is for you. In this video, I'm gonna show you how to approach a React coding interview question while sharing one of the most commonly asked interview question in React. I am a software engineer and I have given hundreds of interviews for React specifically. I've been working in the React industry for 10 years and I have interviewed multiple candidates as well. So in this video, I'm going to share my professional experience with you to help you crack that next React interview. Also, this video is an accompaniment to my free React coding interview guide, which you can get for free right here. This guide has a lot more depth into what kind of questions can be asked, what kind of topics you should prepare for, how to approach people on LinkedIn to get a referral for an interview, and how to polish your resume. Go ahead and get that free ebook linked right here. And now, let's get into the video. But wait, I have a question for you. What did the React parent say to its child? I've gotta give you props. I'm Shruti Kapoor, your favorite developer, entertainer, React educator, and content creator. I've given so many React interviews, and honestly, the more you give React interviews, the better you get at it. It's a practice thing. So let's get into it. Okay, now, the first step that I want you to do when you know that you're going to get a React interview question is ask your recruiter what kind of interview this is going to be. You're going to say, hey recruiter, I was wondering if this is going to be a data structures and algorithms focused interview or a more practical React based interview. And the reason we are asking this is because we want to differentiate if this is going to be a lead code question or a React app question. If it's a lead code question, you don't need this video. But if it's a React interview question, or if they say something like this is going to be a practical JavaScript approach, there might be some React. If they say something like that, this video is going to be helpful for you. Let's keep going. So now that we know that it's not going to be a lead code question, you can focus your preparations for React. In the free ebook, actually, I list a whole list of items that you need to know before you get into your React interview. But in this video, I'm going to show you that once you're doing the interview, what kind of things you need to keep in mind. Number first, that all interviewers are going to be judging you is communication style. So while you're writing your code, you're going to speak out loud what you're thinking, what your next step might be, and you want to make sure that you're on the same page as the interviewer. So one of the things that I like to do is that when I'm given a question, I write down the requirements of what is given to me and I write down what needs to be built. Because there is limited time, I also write down things that would be nice to have. So it is your job as the interviewee to divide your task into must-dos and nice-to-have. And this will help you succeed in the interview better because you would have fulfilled the requirements of the interview. Okay, the first question we're going to do is a question from the React interview guide. We're going to look at this question, which is search input with autocomplete. Here's the question. You're tasked with building a high-performance search input component with autocomplete functionality for an e-commerce product search. Think search bar in Google search. Just to remind you what that means is that if you're on google.com and you have the search bar and you type something like Apple, you see all of these different options that pop up. And then you can also use your keyboard to go between them, go up and select one. This is a React interview question that was asked to me for one of the interviews that I did. So let's build it. So here's a list of requirements that the interviewer has given you. Create a search input field that displays autocomplete suggestions as the user types. Fetch suggestion data from the provided API endpoint. So they would have given you an endpoint. Allow users to select suggestions via a mouse click or keyboard navigation. It is important here that you also remember to do keyboard navigation and handle the submission of the selected item. You also have to talk about what other requirements the interviewer is expecting to do. So something you could do is an API integration with debounce. So you could implement a debounce mechanism so that you're not calling the API over and over again. Making API calls to a given API such as this, except it is debounced. Another part we can do is implement complete keyboard navigation. So we talked about up and down arrow keys using keyboard navigation. Another thing we could do is use enter to select the currently highlighted suggestion. The details of this requirements are in the book. So I'm going to link the book here so I don't have to walk through this. But go ahead and give that a look if you want to understand some detailed requirements of this. Now let's go ahead and start building. I've already started an input element here, and all it does is there's a class name, type of text, name of type ahead, placeholder of search, and it sets up this input field. So it's super simple, doesn't really do much, but it's a good starting point. So you definitely need an input element, right? Now, if you read these requirements, if there's any question that pops into your head and you think, oh, well, maybe that's how it works, make sure you verify that assumption with the interviewer. So for example, one question here is handle the submission of the selected item. What does that mean? It's super vague. Does it mean that I have to send the selected item to the server? Is there a form I need to submit? Or I just rendered the data of whatever item was selected? What does that mean? So make sure when you read the requirements or when you write down the requirements, you also ask clarifying questions of those requirements. And that is one point for you when you ask clarifying questions. In a typical React interview, you'll be given 40 to 45 minutes to do the coding part. So it's important that you also prioritize how you're going to do this. Creating a search input field that displays autocomplete suggestions as the user types, that is one of the core functionalities. So we're going to spend 10 minutes doing this. Fetch suggestions data from the provided API endpoint. Now fetching suggestion and just rendering that data should be super simple. So we're going to give it five minutes. Allowing users to select suggestions via mouse click or keyboard navigation. This can be tricky because we have to handle keyboard navigation. So I'm going to give it 10 minutes. And then finally, handling the submission of the selected item or custom search text. This, depending on what the interviewer has given you, can be super simple, which is just rendering the text on the screen, or it could be complicated, which is sending that data over to the server, or maybe doing some form of validation. So we're going to keep it simple and we're going to say just render the item that was submitted. So we're going to give it 2 minutes. Okay. Now this is a distribution of how you're going to spend the next few minutes. And it is very important that as you're doing your interview question, you're also keeping a watch on the time. Because if you're out of time and if you haven't completed the requirements, that might be a fail. Speaking of which, it is also important that you talk to your interview about what are the must-do items and what are the nice-to-haves in this. One thing that we didn't talk about is debounce. So I'm going to put a debounce as a nice-to-have. Why? Because there is already a JavaScript library, Lodash, that I can use to debounce the API. So I don't have to do the details of debounce until the end of the interview. Okay, let's get into it. All right, so we have 10 minutes to do this. Let's go. Okay, the first thing that I have to do is create a search input field that displays autocomplete suggestions as the user types. Now that means that I first of all need a set state, which would know what value was even submitted, right? And value set input value. I'm going to initialize this use state with a blank string. Why? Because when nothing is entered, I don't have to show anything. All right, and this value is going to be the value that is in input value. And now when we change anything in the field, we also want to make sure that we're updating our input value. And now what I'm going to do is, because they said you just handle it by showing the data on the screen, I'm just going to show that data on the screen. So I'm going to add a paragraph here and I'm going to say input value. Okay, so as I type pick a pool, if I can type my name, I show this value on the screen. Cool. Of course, this is not debounced. We don't have any such autocomplete, but that's fine. We've got an input field going. So let's add a search input field that displays autocomplete suggestions. Now, in order to add autocomplete suggestions, I actually need a preloaded list of suggestions, right? If I'm typing, for example, Apple, APP, I want to be able to see a list of suggestions that says Apple, application, apply, things like that, right? I don't have that suggestion list right now. But the second step talks about fetching suggestion data from the provided API endpoint. So for now, I am actually going to create a dummy list so that I can go through the next bit of my app, okay? Which is to create that dropdown. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a div class name. And as you're doing this, make sure you're also giving it proper class names and you're keeping your code clean. So I'm going to call it type ahead. You can also mention to your interviewer that if you have more time, you will move these components out into their own component. All right, now I have a type ahead drop down. And, oh, look at that. Neat. Because I already have some styles, it has actually styled it nicely. Okay, now that I click, something that you'll see is that as you type field A, it shows everything that's in there. And that is because it's actually showing everything in suggestions. So let's go ahead and fix that. So I don't need suggestions. I'm going to call this suggestions list. All right. And then this is going to be input suggestions, actually matched suggestions. And this is actually product seeds. Okay. That's better. Suggestions and set suggestions. Equals use state. Now I do need to enter these suggestions and filter these suggestions. So let's get rid of this on change. So let's create an on change function here called handle change, which is where I'm going to set suggestions, product list.filter, input value. Let's get rid of this, add that here. add event here, event.target.value, add handle change. Alrighty. Set suggestions equal new state. So what we want to do in this function is that in handle change, I first want to set the input value to be the value that the user entered. But as I type, I want to show user a list of suggestions, right? So for that, I need to go through products list dot filter and then item, as long as item dot includes e.target.value. If you had done input value right here instead of e.target.value, you could see potential issues because you're reading the state in the same place you are setting it. And depending on which React version you are on, you could potentially see some issues. So be careful with that. And your React interviewer is probably gonna watch out for that. Okay, and then we're gonna set suggestions. Now this is going to be filtered data, filtered suggestions, and set suggestions to be filtered suggestions. All right. Now, if I type Apple, I see items that have A in it. How cool, right? So as I say APPLE, I do see Apple pop up in here. I'm gonna make this one a little bit prettier. Let me give it an H1. Actually, maybe H2. All right, just to distinguish it. And move this out of the type ahead component into a fragment. Now, if I have time, I'm actually gonna send this input value over to my app.jsx, but we won't have time for that in this interview. So I'm just going to render the input value in here. Now, something that I want you to remember is that interviewing is actually like a full-time job. And therefore, it is really important that you take breaks. This is a habit that I have been cultivating myself. And one of the ways I relax is sitting in my room, in my office space right here. This is where I sit down and relax. This is not only my workspace, but also my Zen studio. And I want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, Govi, for helping me make this studio a Zen space. I am super excited to partner with Govi. I have been a huge fan of their products. Most of the lights that you see in the studio are actually by Govi, and I have been using them for years. I'm going to show you this really cool lights that I came across that Govi has. These lights are really cool because when I play videos or when I play movies, my backlight matches my videos and it looks so cool. This is the Govi AI Sync box and I really like it because as opposed to other models, this one doesn't have a camera that sits on top of your device. This is really cool because I can hide all of the wires away, although I could probably do a better job at that. And I can just enjoy watching my movie. I love these lights. And in combination of all these lights, it makes a very beautiful Zen space that I enjoy chilling in, putting on my music and just relaxing, reminding myself that giving interviews is actually a full-time job in itself and I gotta take it easy on myself. Finally, one thing that helps me stay calm during this process is also reminding myself that I may face a ton of failures, but at the end of the day, I only need an offer from one job. So let's keep going. All right, let's get back into code. After you add a little bit of code, make sure you test it and make sure you test the edge cases. So let's go ahead and test something. Okay, let's remove everything. You want to check for the edge cases, which is nothing is typed. So in this case, we don't show suggestions. We don't show the rendered item, which is correct. If I type T and let's say I type A, which is, I'm guessing nothing is available for T. I don't see any suggestions, which is not showing. So the suggestions are not showing up, which is correct. Perfect. Now, one thing that we talked about was debounce. So something that you'll see is that if I'm searching as fast as I'm typing, right? So I got APPLE, I'm typing as fast as I'm searching. And that is clearly not performant. One of the requirements of this app is to be performant. So one of the things we talked about is debounce. So let's go ahead and implement that. Let's optimize as we go, okay? So now we've got filtered suggestions here, which is right here. And now let's go ahead and debounce this. Now, depending on how important debouncing is to the interviewer, you can ask them, do you want me to implement the debounce myself or is it okay if I use an external library? Based on that, you can kind of direct from there. Let's say that the interview says it's okay to use an external library. Now we want to use debounce here, _.debounce, which accepts a function. We're going to create that function here, value, and return products list.filter suggestion.tool lowercase starts with, and actually we're going to say includes value.tool lowercase. Okay. And that looks correct. We don't need this. So let's get rid of that. Alrighty. Let's check if it works. If I write A, P, P, you see how it like starts popping up as I'm typing. Now, if I add a really long wait, it should also debounce it. If I say A, P, 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 you see it's not immediately searching. So that means that debounce is working. So we've completed the first part of this, which is create a search input field that displays autocomplete suggestions as the user types. And we've also implemented this nice to have, which is debounce. Now it says fetch suggestion data from the provided API endpoint. Let's go ahead and do that. Now, basically what that means is that products list should actually come from the API endpoint that they've given. For us, we're going to use this dummy JSON endpoint, which gives a list of products like this. So we're going to need a use effect. And in this use effect, I'm going to fetch the API. And I'm going to create a new constant here called API underscore URL, which is where I'm going to store my API. And now here, I'm going to fetch my API URL. And then response JSON data. Okay, so set products. This is going to be empty. And then here we're going to say set products list data.product. And now this is going to be products list. Okay, remember to add a dependency. Meanwhile, also remember that we have this debounce function, which is where we're doing all this filtered stuff. This could be a really heavy function. So remember to add a use callback. Now, where is my data actually? So the data is in products, and then we're going to check for the title of the product. So that's going to be products.title. Okay, so we've got items. 2 children with the same key object. That is because the key here is set to suggestion. So this should be suggestion.id. Sweet. Okay. And so now if I type really fast, it doesn't actually search right away, but it waits for a while to search. Meanwhile, also remember that we have this debounce function, which is where we're doing all this filtered stuff. This could be a really heavy function. So remember to add a use callback. So if I type something that doesn't exist, I don't get back anything, which is what I expect. Sweet. Then the last part that we have to do is allow users to select suggestions via mouse click or keyboard navigation and handle the submission of the selected item or custom search text, which we've already taken care of. So let's do this. Allow users to select suggestions via mouse click or keyboard navigation. Now, I am going to first handle the mouse click part. In order to do that, what I need to do is add a on click item on this div. So I got on click. All right, so now it's an unordered list, and this is going to be a list item. That's important during the interview. Make sure that your HTML is actually semantic HTML. All right, so we've got a key. Now I'm going to add an on click handler here. On click equals handle. And now let's go ahead and create this function. Const handle suggestion click. Okay, so what do we want to do in suggestion click? We want to set the input value to be the value that was selected. So that is going to be, we actually send the suggestion over. So that's going to be suggestion. And then in here, I'm going to pass in handle suggestion. So now if I type MAS and I click on this, it's updated to the item that I just clicked. However, you'll notice that this item is still visible. Let's get rid of this. So to do that, we'll actually create a new Boolean flag called set show suggestions, and then set suggestions, use state false. And now I'm only going to show suggestions if this is set to show suggestions. All right, and now in my handle change, I'm going to set suggestions, and then I'm going to set show suggestions to be true. And then in my handle change, I'm going to set when a suggestion click, I'm going to set it to false. Added a little bit of styling, made it look pretty. So now if I do MAS, I see this, click on it, looks nice. Okay, but something that I do need to do is that if I write EYE, I should be able to use my keyboard to navigate between these items. That is one of the requirements of this type ahead component. Now, how am I going to do that? This is going to be homework for you. So I'm going to give you some hints. Here's what you can do. We're already handling suggestion click on mouse events. So we got to do the same thing for keyboard events. How do we know that it's a keyboard event? We can use on key down, right? And I'm going to add a function here called handle key down. Okay. Now in the handle key down function, I just have to make sure that if it's an enter key, I'm actually selecting an item. If it's an arrow key, I'm navigating between items. And if it is escape key, I am clearing the drop down list. Try it out. So there is actually one trick in it that I would like you to discover, which is when you want to highlight the text, how are you going to do that? It's a little bit tricky. Give it a shot. Let me know how it goes. The solution for this entire code is going to be in the description in a GitHub repo. So if you get stuck, feel free to check it out. But if you do try it out, let me know if you discovered the trick. But if you're stuck, let me know what's up. So that was an example of how to approach a React interview. If this video helped you, give it a big thumbs up. If I get 100 thumbs ups, I am going to record another React interview question. Don't forget to download the free React interview guide. It's available to you at no cost. And if you like this video and you have questions about any other hook in this video, here's a playlist that may help you, and I specifically recommend the use effect video. Thank you for watching. Good luck in your interviews.